traders, Adam Harris here, Chief Market Analyst. So let's have a look at the high impact news that's scheduled for this week. So generally there's concerns with regards to, in most economies at the moment, especially as a consequence of tariffs and sort of trade deals breaking down and relationships breaking down as well. Looking to see if there's, Japan has its own issues to deal with, but looking to see if there's any softening there. In the UK as well, we're going to see how the excuse me, how growth is dealing as well as with regards to inflation. And the US, one of the difficulties now is that a lot of the US data is not being released. It's not necessarily not being tracked, but it's not being released, and also it's becoming a little bit unreliable, which is not really a great sign for the US dollar going forwards. And often when it is released, it's not good. So that being said, let's go to the charts and just see what the markets are thinking about all of this. All right, so we start off with the fear index. What do we see? If you kind of go back to towards April and May, you can see this starting to curve around the bottom, starting to climb very slowly. Again, within the bigger picture with context on the weekly and the monthly, we are not really in any danger zone, but typically what can happen is that it can accelerate. All right, we can see that happen. It can do it relatively quickly, or it can spike, but we are still what I would consider in a relatively calm state. The markets are not panicking. This is always something that's worth checking, because it's unusual that the markets would be in a state of panic and you wouldn't see a reaction here. So go and have a look at the dollar index here. I spoke about this last week. I was saying that essentially we are stuck within a range, and until we break out of that range, there is a fair chance that the dollar will continue to stay within it, and then subsequently could work its way back down to the bottom, and that could take several weeks. So there is a possibility here that the dollar still has not broken out, and if it does decide it wants to work down to the bottom of the range, we could have a weakening US dollar between now and January. Then what we did was we went and had a little bit of a closer look here on the daily, and we can see that we are in an uptrend. Prices pull back into the moving averages, produced a very small bullish candle off this level, 99 level. And so this week, what I'm looking for, again, I said this last week, I said, look, there was a bit of a fork in the road, and that's actually what it did. It came back here. It really hasn't done much. It stayed in the same area. It really hasn't decided to go up or down. So it is still on the table that the dollar could ultimately attempt to break out of the range. But one of the things I want to show you here is that we have started to breach this trend line. Okay, we started to breach this trend line. This happened a couple of days, Thursday and Friday, and that usually would imply that this is starting to lose its bullish momentum. Okay, meaning that we could see the dollar attempt to go up and then fail. It's implying that it's potentially not going to break out of the range. Okay, it's a very subtle sign, but it does mean that actually this is not as strong. The dollar is not necessarily that strong, and therefore it is now, I would say, at least a 60% chance that we're going to fail to break out of the range at this point in time. That being said, let's see how this week plays up, but we still have the same game plan. If we go and have a look at euro dollar, it is still stuck in a weekly and monthly range. And so not really expecting too much from that. Again, we have a downtrend here. We haven't broken the previous high, but we have retraced quite a bit. So this is a particularly bullish move. And again, it implies that this bearish momentum is waning. All right, then we have a look at GBP. So GBP, this was the kind of danger that I spoke about last week as well. We had a beautiful setup. We continued through. We triggered it, then reversed, and now we're in an uptrend. So we've got high lows, high highs on the daily. Even though we have a downtrend technically on the monthly there of lower highs, lower lows, and definitely a downtrend on the weekly, we've now shifted into an uptrend on that. So what does that mean? It means that we're now looking at a weekly retracement. If we have a look at dollar yen is starting to slow down. That actually means that if you go all the way back to October, we really haven't gained much ground here. We're still trending or flowing to the upside, but we're not really doing that in a fantastically sort of winning way. Now, Aussie dollar, US dollar is one of the worst charts, and actually the Aussie pairs are just generally garbage. I would stay away from most of them, if not all of them. By and large, it's in a range. I beg your pardon, this is dollar Swissy. What am I saying? This is dollar Swissy, I beg your pardon, and it is now at the bottom of the range, produced a very strong bullish candle on Friday, so we could see this push back up to the top of the range, which is strange because that now hints at a stronger dollar, while the rest are hinting at a weaker dollar. Dollar CAD here as well, also starting to lose a little bit of its luster. It is still in an uptrend, has produced a bullish candle, bullish engulfing bar, and broken the high. It is flowing upwards, so very similar to dollar yen, but at the same time, it's got some bearish divergence here. It's starting to stumble a bit, so I think that there is a good chance we may start entering a range here on dollar CAD in the coming days. So let's just add a little bit of text there. So just marking this here in anticipation of it. Again, as we head into Christmas, guys, I don't expect much to happen. Generally, very little happens between Christmas and New Year's. One one of the things I want to add here is that as a general rule, for those of you who don't know this already, is that as the markets do very little between Christmas and New Year's, it is not good to trade. Right, it's lower volume, it's sticky, it's got so many holidays, and spreads are wider. It's just not worth your while. It's a really good time if you want to skill up, if there's a course or a program or something that you want to do. But from a trading perspective, from around about the 22nd of December up until, let me just check the calendar, up until January the 5th. I don't expect the markets to do very much. Monday is the 5th. So I don't expect much. Why? Because that means that Thursday and Friday are the 1st and 2nd. Thursday is New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and the 2nd is just a Friday. So it's going to be garbage until the 5th of January. Just chill and relax. All right. Gold. Okay, so gold is in an uptrend on the daily. It is in an uptrend on the weekly, and it is in an uptrend on the monthly, and we are coming back. So this week, what I'm looking for Monday or Tuesday is to see a bullish candle form here if it's going to attempt to continue this trend to the upside. We had a little bit of a kind of a pullback on Friday, a sell-off, if you will, across all the different asset classes, which is interesting. If the markets were fearful or scared, I would have expected gold and silver to spike, and they didn't, which actually means if we had a sell-off on those as well, it's probably more profit-taking than it is out of fear and panic. So this is what I'm looking for this week. Nice little bullish bar to form Monday or Tuesday, and to attempt by the end of the week to work its way back up to 4,200 and beyond. Should it alternatively just fall straight through down to the support level about 3,000, closer to 3,900, then we might have a bigger picture change here. We might actually be finding that the weekly is not ready to continue to the upside, and even possibly hinting at a monthly correction. So that's why I say this week could be very revealing about what the next month or more is going to hold for gold and silver. Let's compare this to silver. Have a look. It's a very similar scenario here. So yes, I am expecting silver to work its way back into the highs over here, and I'm looking for a nice bullish candle Monday or Tuesday. Nice uptrend to continue it up, come back up to these highs. We now, by the way, have true resistance at this level. So let me just put that in. We now have true resistance over here. Let's bring it down actually. But that is something we now have to deal with. So any trades that I take at this point, I'll make sure that I am taking profit or closing those trades out ahead of those levels if the market starts to work its way back up. Then this is interesting. Sorry, actually, you know what I'm going to do here? Just get rid of that. I'm going to put it in on the monthly. Hold on a second. All right, because that is obviously a very significant level. Certainly on the weekly here, we can see that that is a strong level of resistance. And so we're going to have to see how this handles it. But one of the reasons I'm optimistic about silver in general is that it's really only now just started to get back to and just break past all-time highs. So if you look at it historically, it's only back just beyond where it was in 2011. So it has more upside potential. But of course, yes, it is overextended, and a kind of a pullback here at some point is going to happen. The real question is just, is that going to be now, or is that going to be in the new year? Then if you have a look at the global indices had a little bit of a sell-off on Friday. Here's what's a little bit of a red flag in the price action. We did do a move up, we pulled back, we did another move up, and we immediately pulled back. Now we have this bearish divergence. The reason we have this is because the market reacted bearishly too quickly after this previous move. So it did a move up, and then in a much shorter period of time, it did another move and a failure, which means it's accelerating its pullbacks, which implies that it is getting ready for a deeper correction on the weekly. And so that is what I'm going to keep an eye out for this coming week. I'm going to be looking at last week's weekly candle and looking for breaks below the low or breaks above the high. I do think that I think we're still in a bull market at this time. It's evidenced by the weekly. We're quite far away from the 50-period moving average. And at some point, yes, I do expect that we will have a bit of a pullback into these previous highs. We may still get that this coming week. And in fact, it's also possible that we could just be getting ready to just wind out of the year. I know it's the beginning of November, but wouldn't completely surprise me that if the markets just started to go into a bit of a coma ahead of Christmas. It's earlier than usual, but just putting that on the table. But nevertheless, this is a little bit of a red flag here, this fact that it moved up and pulled back immediately. It's the same with the S&P. We can see here we've got a lower high. We have come back down and tested the lows, and it's this flirting with the 50 period on the daily, which is kind of the red flag in this particular case. We don't often do that. We don't often come back to the 50 on the daily. We don't frequently do it, but we've started to accelerate doing that quite a bit. And so this implies that at some point we're going to cross below the 50. We've got this continued bearish divergence over here. And this sort of implies that at some point we're going to get a bit of a deeper correction. So I would say that it's possible at some point, and the question is, will that be this week, or will it manage to push a little bit higher this week and try and gain some ground again? At some point, we're going to get that pullback. And I would say it's now starting to show up in the near future. So again, going to be interesting to see if I just mark this, do we start to get a little bit of a stumble? All right, we're going to have to see if that's the case. Low or high, coming back down to test these levels. And again, I think that's why the weekly candle is so important here. Watching the break of the low or the high is going to give us clues as to whether this has still got some juice in it. And as I said, we are still in a bull market. But at some point, we are going to have a bit of a monthly correction, and we could well be getting ready for that. It could time very well. Also, we tend to have a correction in September and then a rally as we go into Christmas. That'll be the Santa Claus rally. And sometimes in January, you can have a bit of a correction as well. So I'm just kind of wary of that. But I guess where I'm going with this is that we are starting to lose a bit of momentum on the weekly, and we could see a bit of a correction. All we need to do is get rid of some of that buying pressure. Here, when you look at the Russell 2000, we are struggling a bit with these previous highs, and you can see this starting a retracement on the monthly. So in other words, what you're seeing on some of these charts is actually a monthly retracement. But that doesn't mean that we won't necessarily end up bullish in December. The FTSE as well starting to produce a bit of a bearish indecision candle there, which could lead to a bit of a correction lower. I'm watching that this week. Overall, I would say it's quite bullish, except for the fact that we had a breakout and we've pulled right back into these previous lows, which in itself is not a sign of strength. And if you look at the last 3-week candles, we are struggling to break through this level of resistance. Right, let us carry on. Let's have a look at the DAX. The DAX has been range bound for a while, 6 months. Going on 7, and at some point I do expect it, now that it's reaching the moving averages and it gets closer to that sort of economy of buyers and sellers, that we'll see a breakout, but that may only be in the new year. Not expecting much from it now. Let's have a look at, again, this is start. I keep updating my watch list, and let's have a look at Nikkei. We didn't look at crude oil. I'm going to have to go through that as well. So for some reason, it didn't save the changes that I did last week with you guys. Okay, so Nikkei, very much due, I would say, on the monthly for a bit of a pullback here. It's had an incredible month. Possibly here, it's going to have a bit of a correction on the weekly. So this week is interesting. Thursday night hinted at a correction on Friday. And the question really is, are we going to see a follow through this week? We had a nice correction, bit of a rebound on Friday, which is always going to be the case whenever there's a correction. Whenever there's a sell-off and it hits a key level, there's going to be some buying responses to that. The question is, are we going to see another drop low this week? What that will do is start to spook the markets a bit and could lead to a slightly longer term, or let's say medium-term correction for a couple of weeks. Just going back to crude oil here quickly. So we continue to drip lower, but just very slowly. It's very choppy and not great to trade this. But my expectation for now, the downtrend is intact on the daily, on the weekly, as well as on the monthly. And so for now, I do expect this to keep going down. It's trying to get towards that $56 level. Let's move on and have a look at Bitcoin. All right, so we're on to cryptos now. So this did fall through this level of support. It also fell through the next level. And so what we're looking at now is a monthly retracement. Overall, again, I'm not convinced that this is necessarily in any major danger at this point in time. Interesting just to note the increase in wicks here. So we get a couple of wicks here, we get 3 or 4 wicks here, and we start to see an increase in that. But for now, my primary or plan A expectation is that we will see this stabilize where it is this week. We could very well see it attempt to come back and get back up above that 100,000 level. It may finish above it, it may find resistance and continue down. But I'm leaning towards the area where it is as a possible stabilization area, and that could be between now and Christmas. Overall, I don't see at least technically, I'm not seeing any signs of massive weakness here. Ethereum also now likely to come back into the range, but it's also in the moving averages here. And again, a bullish candle this week. By the end of the week would be a nice sign. Will we get a bullish candle? Will we see it then start to push higher throughout into December? Let's go through the Mag 7. Let's have a look at Apple. Overall, Apple pulling in a little bit of resistance where it is now, starting to slow down a little bit, but overall a little bit overextended, but otherwise nice and healthy. No signs of weakness there. Microsoft struggling with this area, but also now stuck in a range. So let's just mark this range off here. You could see it battling at the top, but also stuck in this area. So again, I see this more as a consolidation back into these moving averages before continuing higher, which is now at this point probably going to be in the year. We can see here with Amazon as well, a failed breakout. It's tried to break up through this level. It's come back down this week. I want to see if we can get back up above that level. Seeing a little bit of bearish divergence there. It's stumbling a little bit, but not super, super weak. And I don't think it's completely overvalued or in terms of technically overvalued. on the monthly, so I still see some potential upside. Let's have a look at Alphabet. So Google is one of the companies that appears set to benefit from AI just because they are so well vertically integrated with everything. They've got their fingers in all the pies, almost more so than anyone else. And so they've really been experiencing quite a bit of growth, but also at the same points, they have to have a bit of a pullback here. So again, this week I'll be watching the weekly highs and lows here. Will we get a bit of a pullback down towards that sort of 250 level and see if we get a deeper correction? And so again, here you can see the daily is starting to want to come back down here, and that is the 50. So then it starts to connect to the 50, and the last time that it did that was June. So again, we could see a bit more of a follow through the side, but I'm not seeing, again, I see those more as deeper corrections within the medium and longer term trends rather than a change of that. Meta has pulled back. So again, this one very similar to some of the other stuff we've seen where it started pull back, immediately got up and immediately pull back again. And that is something that is not really a great sign. It usually implies that we're about to go into a consolidation. So for Meta, although I wouldn't be surprised if we did end up moving higher, I think we could see some struggle with this 800 level. And right now it is looking quite weak. Nice little rejection over there on the weekly. We could see a little bit further downside, but it's already trying to slow down. So excuse me, we're going to have to see if it stabilizes in this area as well. NVIDIA, looking particularly healthy on the monthly there. Again, it could, there's no shame in this doing a bit of a correction here on the monthly. So again, I'll be watching that. But overall, this looks nice and strong. Wouldn't be surprised if we did see a bullish candle this week. You can see the bullish candles coming in already, trying to push it higher. But what's most interesting that I've mentioned a few times here is this that we get this nice move, and we don't really get pullbacks like this too frequently. We've had big moves and then immediately a pullback, and that's a sign of stumbling. That's usually what leads to a consolidation or bigger correction. Tesla battling a little bit over here, and again, it could hold at this level or it could do a little bit of a deeper correction down towards 350. That is a possibility. That would probably still leave the weekly and monthly, medium and longer term charts intact. And so this correction on Tesla, to put it in context, is not exclusive to Tesla. It's happening across the Mag 7, and it could just simply be profit taking ahead of Christmas. But it is not exclusive to Tesla at this point. Just to clarify that. It does sometimes annoy me on social media when they'll talk about one particular stock that has a sell-off and then say that it's exclusive to that particular stock, and there's a reason why that happens. And they might do that, for example, with Microsoft or Netflix, for example, could be various other things. When often when you look, you can see it happening across the board. So I think it's important to distinguish the difference between it being a group thing or whether it is specifically can be tied to that one particular stock. That's all I'm saying. Netflix slowing down last 4 months, just doing some very, very small moves here, but overall looking really, really strong. It's still attempting to break through this and not doing too well, but it's kind of stabilizing this here. And again, unless there's a surprise where we see a sudden sell-off, which obviously could always happen, but then I think we'd probably see that everywhere. I'm expecting this to try to turn around where it is and go up. So they're not all looking equally weak. They are just looking like they're a bit top heavy. Now, Tesco. Last week, looking very nice, bit of a sell-off here, and I think this is tied to the sell-off that we saw across other markets here. Again, we could very well just be seeing a sell-off here to bring this back down to that 408, maybe even that 400 mark, which is not the end of the world. We did mark it before, or at least mark previous levels. So sell-off here to me is seen more as a letting off some of the buying pressure and also allowing for a good buying opportunity if it does come for a correction down here. So it's back at the moving averages. Overall, nice trend. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bullish candle form this next week if it's going to go. So just to sum up with a lot of these, I'm going to be focusing on the weekly charts. I'm looking to see either small bullish candles, and of course, in some of the situations with indices, for example, do we break the low and do we have a deeper correction, which I would then associate closer to a kind of a monthly correction. And again, it always pays to see the glass as half full rather than half empty when it comes to stocks. It wouldn't be a surprise to me that if we did have a heavy sell-off over the coming weeks, that we could have a massive recovery by Christmas time. That is something that has happened in the past, and it wouldn't be a complete surprise. So I don't want to jump the gun and say, look, this is definitely a bigger correction coming. I don't really see enough evidence of that. I see that even if we are slowing down, that is how I would treat it, take it week by week. So this coming week, cautiously neutral, possibly small bearishness there. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gents. I'm going to leave you with that. Trade carefully. The dollar is just a little bit wishy-washy, but we could see it continue to weaken this week. The indices are still in a bull market. We are still in a bull market, but we could see a bit of a further downside and possibly by the end of the week, even stabilizing or correcting. And then, of course, with Bitcoin, again, that's one to watch as well. So again, this last week, we could see this could turn out ultimately to have been nothing other than profit taking within a general bullish environment. All right. Thank you very much.